and you're listening to Communities Live on Sheffield Live Radio 93.2 FM with me, Susie Casson and T-Boy, and we're joined in the studio by Brian Holmshaw from Sheaf Heritage. Welcome, Brian. Thanks
Hello,
for coming
hi.
in. So can you first of all tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, myself? Well, I live on Norfolk Road, just off City Road, above the amphitheatre and the station, and I think that's why I called it Sheaf Heritage, because I can see that from whenever I step out each day. I've got a dog called Sasha. We take the dog over into the Coral Memorial Park, and there it is in front of me, the whole of the Sheaf Valley, looking over towards Healy, Nether Edge, right over Bramall Lane. So I can see Bramall Lane from just near my house.
Yeah,
So I came up with the name then.
Fantastic, yeah. So what is Sheaf Valley Heritage and how did you have the idea for it?
Right, well, going way back, I have always been interested in the history of Sheffield. I grew up originally in a one-up, one-down courthouse in Crooksmoor, late 60s, just before lots of demolition, and I think that's had an impact on the way that I think about things, and I have to be aware of what is being demolished and what's still there, what that heritage is. My grandfather, he was the one that gave me the real passion for history, because he left school at 14 from St Matthias in Sharrow, and he was self-educated, so he found out about history, he found out about local history, he knew all about the fields around him. He moved to Shire Green, and we used to go walking in the woods, woolly woods, there's fantastic bluebell woods, and he was telling me the story of the area. In Shire Green, but also Sharrow, where he grew up. So he gave me a bug for local history. Yeah. And eventually it's turned out that what I want to do is I want to pass on that passion for local history. I've got such a lot out of it, and I think other people should get access to their heritage too.
Yeah. So Sheffield has a really rich heritage. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, Susie, because a lot of people, including a lot of Sheffielders, don't think that it has, and that's something I've come up across in time. I find it rather weird, because I grew up in Sheffield, and I moved away. I've lived in lots of different places. I lived in York and Edinburgh and Manchester, Leeds, amongst other places, and I find that Sheffield has as much to offer as those places do. It's a different kind of heritage, and I think it's much more to do with the particular culture of Sheffield, and of its identity. So it gives Sheffield a context, and it's a different kind of context from Manchester or Leeds. So, for example, if you're in Manchester, you can get very easily impressed by all the architecture that's around you. There's been lots of money put into that by the Victorians, and since that didn't happen in Sheffield. A lot of the money from the Victorian philanthropists went into landscapes. They bought parks. Largely, they didn't build great buildings, particularly ones in the city centre. So that's what we've got. But I think we've got this very good vernacular architecture. Vernacular being the term that's for, it's kind of an ordinary type of architecture. Second World War bombs have done enormous damage to it, and there's been some very poor planning and a lack of vision over the last 30-40 years. So those buildings are much reduced. But it has 38 great conservation areas. There are over 1,000 listed buildings, and 42 of them are Grade 2 starred. So I think that is worth saving. Allied with that, you've got the friendliest city around. Virtually everybody says that comes here. And you've got people who are increasingly, I think, interested in that. So, I found on the walks that people are fascinated by their own ordinary history. They perhaps have not been well taught at school in terms of history. It's always been the history of the kings and queens. And when they come to my sessions, we don't talk about that. We talk about their history, our history, and we mix and match our stories.
Yeah, great. And there's a great pride in Sheffield as well, isn't there? I think that's what I've noticed.
There's a pride in the city, but there's also a pride in its areas as well. Mm. It's this thing that people say about, it's a city that's composed of villages, which are all with their own identities.
Yeah.
And that's that is odd, because you don't find that in quite the same way. I've certainly not found it where I've lived in the country.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was going to ask you, which parts of Sheffield do you find particularly rich in cultural and industrial heritage?
There are areas that I particularly like, and I think it's a little bit nostalgic on my part, probably, because they are things like Sharrow. I think that Sharrow's really underrated as an area. It's got lots of fascinating buildings. The Grade 2 starred Mount Pleasant house on Sharrow Lane, for example, fantastic example of architecture. Loads of stories connected to that about its history, about how it was a girls' charity school. It was used as a mental health asylum for a while. It's been a driving school. It's been a community centre, and there are lots of stories connected to that. So I think that's fascinating. And Sharrow got lots more as well. Things like the Hornhandle Works, Club Garden Road. Why was it called Club Garden Road? Because it had a gardening club that was based there. Yeah. And it's in the name, actually, when you think about it. So Sharrow's one of those areas. And I live in Norfolk Park as well, and I've started doing some walks locally for Victoria Community Enterprise, for the church and community enterprise that's based there. So we're doing these walks called Get Manor Moving. That's the idea. And we will be walking around the area and looking at the Grade 2 listed buildings, the parks, and getting some of the stories and anecdotes from people to do with that area as well. So yeah, that's two areas. But, you know, it's all through Sheffield. You know, the social and industrial and the cultural heritage, I think is really strong. And out to the suburbs as well. I mean, there's a strong identity in Low Edges and in Gleedless and in Grenell, places like that.
Yeah, fantastic. So one of the things that you do as part of Sheaf Valley Heritage is help out with research. And what kind of things have you studied in the past?
Well, I've looked at working with neighbourhood groups and historical organisations, and what I do is research the communities that people come from, and those could be recent communities that have come to Sheffield. I look at family histories and the streets of an area. I've just been asked to help out with some research on Southview Crescent for a street party that they're organising in July. And they want to know a little bit more about the history of that street, so I've been asked to do that. I'm sure it's going to be great fun because I'm invited to the party as well.
Good. Lovely. And you lead walks, you mentioned.
I do, yes. Yeah. Now that's really quite taken off, really, in the last 6 months to a year. Some of them are chargeable, so I tend to charge a £5, and they're the beer and brewery walks, which I've been doing. I've been working with Jules at Sheffield Beer Week.
Oh yes, yeah.
And this year we had a group from Norway, and they came to Sheffield to watch football and to take part in the beer walk activities. And these 6 guys from Norway, who I took round Neep's End, along with some other people as well. We visited 3 breweries there, so that's one of them. I also do some makers walks as well, because it's been Sheffield City of Making the past year, so I did makers walks in Healy and in Crooks, and I'll certainly be happy to do more, put them up on my website and Facebook for people to know about. And I've been doing walks around the Antiques Quarter as well, which I think is really underrated as an area. There are some great buildings there, which have been enhanced by having the antique shops in there and the cafes.
Yeah. Lovely. So you host all kinds of activities and events as well as Sheaf Valley Heritage. Do you have anything coming up soon?
Well, I'm really busy just after Easter. I've got some walks in the city centre, and I'm working with a lot of health and wellbeing groups. So the Sheffield 50 to 64 Dementia Group, we're going to be finding out about the history of West Street and of Fargate and the Moor. And I think that's important, because working with a particular client group, if you like, the stories of the 1980s, for them, are just as important as the stories of the 1930s and the 1940s and the 50s were. They will certainly assist with reminiscence and with creating a social cohesion within the group as we go around, because people will be talking to each other and passing on stories that they know and sharing experiences. and I think that's really important for health and well-being.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'll be doing. I'm working with Sheffields United, the Community Foundation. We're going to be doing some sporting history based at the Sheffield United ground, which I'm looking forward to as a Unitedite. Got to put that one in. And I'm going to be doing some lecturing for the WEA in Sheffield in the autumn, and that's going to be a series of talks about Sheffield's history. I'm working with a guy called Robin Fielder, who's been long established as a local historian, and we've got a chance to have a look in some depth at some of Sheffield's history and themes in a bit more of a, perhaps a slightly more academic way. With the walks and the short workshops, you get a bit of a snapshot, but this is a kind of a course as well, so I'll be doing that.
Yeah, wow, lots of fascinating stuff there. So what do you find most challenging about being involved with Sheaf Valley Heritage, would you say?
Well, I've always enjoyed being self-employed, so that's not a problem. I love doing that, working for myself. You don't always know what's around the corner, but I've always learnt so much from the walks and the workshops that Sheaf Valley Heritage has given an enormous amount to me in that respect. What has been hard is convincing people, particularly people in positions of power, how important heritage is. That it's not something out there that happens in York. It happens in Sheffield, and it's for Sheffield people. So that's been the hardest aspect of it. We are seeming, in some cases, to choose to wreck a place that we live in, and that goes for the landscape, for the buildings, for the streetscape, because the way that a street looks is very important to the way that we use it, live in it and work in it. I find people who don't use their power to speak out and to criticise poor planning decisions and poor developer decisions are the ones who are really irresponsible, and they're misusing that power. So I can give an example. Jessop's Hospital was a very poor decision, I think. The closure of Carbrook Hall, which is a 17th century building in the east end of Sheffield, that's been a poor decision. No one in power has spoken out about that and said, this needs to be in the hands of the people. This should not be closed down.
Yeah, and once it's done, isn't it?
And once it's done, it's done. It's very hard to change it.
Yeah.
So I find that the most difficult aspect to work with.
Yeah, and Sheffield is changing so quickly, isn't it? It's quite surprising how many changes are taking place, isn't it?
But people are keen on it. People are keen on their history, and I'm finding increasingly people thinking, ooh, I'm going to miss that building when it's gone.
Yeah.
I won't have the stories about it.